Good evening, everybody. Yeesh, that's bright. Uh-oh. Chris Henry is not going to be happy. Good evening, Park End admin. Welcome to the Bible Hour. 1 Samuel chapter 12. Good evening, Petit Bois. First here outside of staff. Good evening, Phil Tammin. Good evening, Diane Robbins. Welcome to the Bible Hour. Ooh, Paula Barrett in the house, live. Shh. Welcome. Uh-oh. Chris Henry's here. So, Chris, I just want to say a few things before we start. For some reason, my camera software on the computer just went kaput today. So I've reinstalled it. And it had auto white balance on. And it kept on like changing everything. And remember like 2 weeks ago and it went red and then yellow and red. So I turned that off. But I turned it off and put the settings right down on it. So currently we're running on no auto white balance, but right at the bottom. Whereas I could put it in the middle or the far right of the spectrum. But at the moment we're rocking auto. You are super. Yeah. All right. Okay. Hold on a minute. And I can't even log out now because camera will say, the camera software will say it's being used by another bit of kit, which means YouTube. Yeah. So this is it for today. I mean, auto white balance. Maybe tomorrow I'll keep auto off, but move it up to the middle. We have 1 minute until, 2 minutes until we begin today's Bible Hour. We in 1 Samuel chapter 12. You're so bright. What if you turn your room light off? Welcome to a special edition of the Bible Hour from the Cave of Mamre in Machpelah. Ready for the Witcher Endor. Okay, yeah, so basically the camera settings are out of a bit, so I may be looking slightly angelic at times. I'll try my best to stay right here. Chris Henry, you're going to have to draw all of the might of heaven just to remain focused on the reading and not my shiny forehead. It is 1 Samuel chapter 12. Welcome on in to day 35 of the Bible Hour. We ask each and every day, what do we learn about Jesus? What do we learn about church? Before we ask, what does this teach me about my particular wing of my particular denomination and how it's superior to another wing and denomination of the Christian church? Before that, even. Before we learn about ethics and behavior, we want to learn about Jesus and his church. And we are in 1 Samuel chapter 12. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Samuel's farewell address. Then Samuel addressed all Israel. I have done as you asked, North Star, and given you a king. Your king is now your leader. I stand here before you, an old grey-haired man, and my sons serve you. I have served as your leader from the time I was a boy to this very day. Now testify against me in the presence of the Lord and before his anointed one. Whose ox or donkey have I stolen? Have I ever cheated any of you? Have I ever oppressed you? Have I ever taken a bribe and perverted justice? Tell me, and I will make right whatever I have done wrong. No, they replied, you have never cheated or oppressed us, and you have never taken even a single bribe. The Lord and his anointed one are my witnesses today, Samuel declared, that my hands are clean. Yes, he is a witness, they replied. It was the Lord who appointed Moses and Aaron, Samuel continued. He brought your ancestors out of the land of Egypt. Now stand here quietly before the Lord as I remind you of all the great things the Lord has done for you and your ancestors. When the Israelites were in Egypt and cried out to the Lord, he sent Moses and Aaron to rescue them from Egypt and to bring them into this land. But the people soon forgot about the Lord their God, so he handed them over to Sisera, the commander of Hazor's army, and also to the Philistines and to the king of Moab, who fought against them. Then they cried to the Lord again and confessed, we have sinned by turning away from the Lord and worshipping the image of Baal and Ashtoreth. But we will worship you and you alone if you will rescue us from our enemies. Then the Lord sent Gideon, Bedan, Jephthah, and Samuel to save you, and you lived in safety. But when you were afraid of Nahash, the king of Ammon, you came to me and said that you wanted a king to reign over you, even though the Lord your God was already your king. All right, here is the king you have chosen. You asked for him, and the Lord has granted your request. Now, if you fear and worship the Lord and listen to his voice, and if you do not rebel against the Lord's army, then both you and your king will show that you recognize the Lord as your God. But if you rebel against the Lord's commands and refuse to listen to him, then his hand will be as heavy upon you as it was upon your ancestors. Now stand here and see the great thing the Lord is about to do. You know that it does not rain at this time of year during the wheat harvest. I will ask the Lord to send thunder and rain today, Then you will realize how wicked you have been in asking the Lord for a king." So Samuel called to the Lord, and the Lord sent thunder and rain that day. And all the people were terrified of the Lord and of Samuel. "Pray to the Lord your God for us, or we will die," they all said to Samuel. "For now we have added to our sins by asking for a king." "Do not be afraid," Samuel reassured them. "You have certainly done wrong, but make sure now that you worship the Lord with all your heart and don't turn your back on him. Don't go back in worshipping worthless idols that cannot help or rescue you. They are totally useless. The Lord will not abandon his people because that would dishonor his great name. For it has pleased the Lord to make you his very own people. As for me, I will certainly not sin against the Lord by ending my prayers for you, and I will continue to teach you what is good and right. But be sure to fear the Lord and faithfully serve him. Think of all the wonderful things he has done for you. But if you continue to sin, you and your king will be swept away." So they have sinned. But it's like that bit in Romans, isn't it? Shall we carry on sinning so the grace of the Lord shall abound? No. Oh, maybe that's why I was shining, because my screen is blistering white. Hello, everybody. I can see. 1 Samuel chapter 13. Hey, Chris Williams is here as well. I missed him in chat because I was blinded. Continued war with Philistia. Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 42 years. Saul selected 3,000 special troops from the army of Israel and sent the rest of the men home. He took 2,000 of the chosen men with him to Michmash and the hill country of Bethel. The other 1,000 went with Saul's son, Jonathan, to Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. Remember Jonathan. Soon after this, Jonathan attacked and defeated the garrison of the Philistines at Geba. The news spread quickly among the Philistines, so Saul blew the ram's horns throughout the land, saying, "Hebrews, hear this, rise up and revolt." All Israel heard the news that Saul had destroyed the Philistine garrison at Geba and that the Philistines now hated the Israelites more than ever. So the entire Israelite army was summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. The Philistines mustered a mighty army of 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and as many warriors as the grains of sand on the seashore. They camped at Michmash, east of Beth-aven. The men of Israel saw what a tight spot they were in, and because they were hard pressed by the enemy, they tried to hide in caves, thickets, rocks, holes, and cisterns. Some of them crossed the Jordan River and escaped into the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul's disobedience and Samuel's rebuke. Meanwhile, Saul stayed at Gilgal, and his men were trembling with fear. Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel, as Samuel had instructed him earlier, but Samuel still didn't come. Saul realized that his troops were rapidly slipping away, so he demanded, "Bring me the burnt offering and the peace offerings," and Saul sacrificed the burnt offerings himself. We'll just check this out there as we go on. Is Saul actually properly, is he the real deal, or do you think he faced the judgment of God as a forgiven sinner and church member, or was he rejected? Just bear that in mind as we go along. Just as Saul finished with the burnt offering, Samuel arrived. Saul went out to meet and welcomed him, but Samuel said, "What is this you have done?" Saul replied, "I saw my men scattering from me, and you didn't arrive when you said you would, and the Philistines are at Michmash ready for battle. So I said, the Philistines are ready to march against us at Gilgal, and I haven't even asked for the Lord's help. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering myself before you came." Even when we panic, we go through the middleman, Jesus, to get to the Lord. We worship the right way. "How foolish," Samuel exclaimed. "You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. Had you kept it, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom must end, for the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. The Lord has appointed him to be the leader of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command." If only there was a king who did keep the commands of God, maybe his kingdom would be established in Israel forever. Oh. Israel's military disadvantage. Samuel then left Gilgal and went on his way, but the rest of the troops went with Saul to meet the army. They went up from Gilgal to Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. When Saul counted the men who were still with him, he found only 600 were left. Saul and Jonathan and the troops with them were staying at Geba in the land of Benjamin. The Philistines set up their camp at Michmash. 3 raiding parties soon left the camp of the Philistines. One went north toward Ophrah in the land of Shual. Another went west to Beth Horon, and a third moved towards the border above the valley of Zeboim near the wilderness. There were no blacksmiths in the land of Israel in those days. The Philistines wouldn't allow them for fear they would make swords and spears for the Hebrews. So whenever the Israelites needed to sharpen their own plowshares, picks, axes, or sickles, they had to take them to a Philistine blacksmith. The charges were as follows: 1/4 of an ounce of silver for sharpening a plowshare or pick, and 1/8 of an ounce for sharpening an axe or making a point of an ox goad. So on the day of battle, none of the people of Israel had a sword or spear except for Saul and Jonathan. The pass at Michmash had meanwhile been secured by a contingent of the Philistine army. 1 Samuel chapter 14. Jonathan's daring plan. One day, Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come on, let's go over to where the Philistines have their outpost." But Jonathan did not tell his father what he was doing. Meanwhile, Saul and his 600 men were camped on the outskirts of Gibeah around the pomegranate tree at Migron. Among Saul's men was Ahijah, the priest, who was wearing the ephod and the priestly vest. Ahijah was the son of Ichabod's brother Ahitub, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord who had served at Shiloh. No one realized that Jonathan had left the Israelite camp. To reach the Philistine outpost, Jonathan had to go between 2 rocky cliffs that were called Bozez and Seneh. The cliff on the north was in front of Michmash, and the one on the south was in front of Geba. "Let's go across to the outpost of those pagans," Jonathan said to his armor bearer. "Perhaps the Lord will help us, for nothing can hinder the Lord. He can win a battle wherever he has many warriors or only a few." "Do what you think is best," the armor bearer replied. "I'm with you completely, whatever you decide." "All right then," Jonathan told him. "We will cross over and let them see us. If they say to us, 'Stay where you are or we will kill you,' then we will stop and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come on up and fight,' then we will go up. That will be the Lord's sign that he will help us defeat them." When the Philistines saw them coming, they shouted, "Look, the Hebrews are crawling out of their holes." Then the men from the outpost shouted to Jonathan, "Come on up here and we'll teach you a lesson." "Come on up, climb right behind me," Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "for the Lord will help us defeat them." So they climbed up using both hands and feet, and the Philistines fell before Jonathan and his armor bearer, who killed those who came behind them. They killed some 20 men in all, and their bodies were scattered over about half an acre. Suddenly, panic broke out in the Philistine army, both in the camp and in the field, including even the outposts and raiding parties. And just then the earthquake struck, and everyone was terrified. Israel defeats the Philistines. Saul's lookouts in Gibeah of Benjamin saw a strange sight. The vast army of Philistines began to melt away in every direction. "Call the roll and find out who's missing," Saul ordered. And when they checked, they found that Jonathan and his armor bearer were gone. Then Saul shouted to Ahijah, "Bring the ephod here." For at that time Ahijah was wearing the ephod in front of the Israelites. But while Saul was talking to the priest, the confusion in the Philistine camp grew louder and louder. So Saul said to the priest, "Never mind, let's get going." Then Saul and all his men rushed out to the battle, and find the Philistines killing each other. There was terrible confusion everywhere. Even the Hebrews who had previously gone over to the Philistine army revolted and joined in with Saul, Jonathan, and the rest of the Israelites. Likewise, the men of Israel who were hiding in the hill country of Ephraim joined the chase when they saw the Philistines running away. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle continued to rage even beyond Beth Aven. It's a bit like the daughters of Zelophehad, that. Like, there's tons of scared church members, but one or two trust the Lord and just do exploits for him, and that he's with them. And then the whole church gets the vibe and gets going. Saul's foolish oath. Now the men of Israel were pressed to exhaustion that day, because Saul had placed them under an oath, saying, "Let a curse fall on anyone who eats before evening, before I have full revenge on my enemies." So no one ate anything all day, even though they had all found honeycomb on the ground in the forest. They didn't dare touch the honey because they feared the oath they had taken. But Jonathan had not heard his father's command, and he dipped the end of his stick into a piece of honeycomb and ate the honey. After he had eaten it, he felt refreshed. But one of the men saw him and said, "Your father made the army take a strict oath that whoever eats food today will be cursed. That is why everyone is weary and faint." "My father has made terrible trouble for us all," Jonathan exclaimed. "A command like that only hurts us. See how refreshed I am now that I have eaten this little bit of honey. If the men had been allowed to eat freely from the food they found among our enemies, think how many more Philistines we could have killed." They chased and killed the Philistines all day from Michmash to Aijalon, growing more and more faint. That evening they rushed for the battle plunder and butchered the sheep, goats, cattle, and calves, but they ate them without draining the blood. Have they not read Leviticus? Someone reported to Saul, "Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that still has the blood in it." "That is very wrong," Saul said. "Find a large stone and roll it over here. Then go out among the troops and tell them, 'Bring the cattle, sheep, and goats here to me. Kill them here and drain the blood before you eat them. Do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with the blood still in it.'" So that night all the troops brought their animals and slaughtered them there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first of the altars he built to the Lord. Then Saul said, "Let's chase the Philistines all night and plunder them until sunrise. Let's destroy every last one of them." His men replied, "We'll do whatever you think is best." But the priest said, "Let's ask God first." You're getting like the sort of characteristics of Saul coming through. So Saul asked God, "Should we go after the Philistines? Will you help us defeat them?" But God made no reply that day. Then Saul said to the leaders, "Something's wrong. I want all my army commanders to come here. We must find out what sin is committed or was committed today. I vow by the name of the Lord who rescued Israel that the sinner will surely die, even if it is my own son, Jonathan." But no one would tell him what the trouble was. Then Saul said, "Jonathan and I will stand over here, and all of you stand over there." And the people responded to Saul, "Whatever you think is best." Then Saul prayed, "O Lord, God of Israel, please show us who is guilty and who is innocent." Then they cast sacred lots, and Jonathan and Saul were chosen as the guilty ones, and the people were declared innocent. Then Saul said, "Now cast lots again and choose between me and Jonathan." And Jonathan was shown to be the guilty one. "Tell me what you have done," Saul demanded of Jonathan. "I tasted a little honey," Jonathan admitted. "It was only a little bit on the end of my stick. Does that deserve death?" "Yes, Jonathan," Saul said. "You must die. May God strike me and even kill me if you do not die for this." But the people broke in and said to Saul, "Jonathan has won this great victory for Israel. Should he die here? Far from it. As surely as the Lord lives, not one hair on his head will be touched, for God helped him do a great deed today." So the people rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. Then Saul called back the army from chasing the Philistines, and the Philistines returned home. Saul's military success. Now, when Saul had secured his grasp on Israel's throne, he fought against his enemies in every direction, against Moab, Ammon, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines, and wherever he returned, he was victorious. He performed great deeds and conquered the Amalekites, saving Israel from all those who had plundered them. Saul's sons included Jonathan, Ishbosheth, and Malchishua. He also had two daughters, Merab, who was older, and Michal. Saul's wife, Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz, was the daughter, yes. The commander of Saul's army was Abner, and the commander of Saul's army was Abner, the son of Saul's uncle Ner. Saul's father Kish and Abner's father Ner were both sons of Abiel. The Israelites fought constantly with the Philistines throughout Saul's lifetime. So whenever Saul observed a young man who was brave and strong, he drafted him into his army. There are rumblings. There are insecurities and rumblings. I would encourage the Bible Hour readers to reread Samuel 1 and 2 and Jeremiah in an English translation from the Septuagint, not the Masoretic text. Try and read 1 and 2 Samuel in a Bible that has copied it from the ancient Greek text, not the ancient Hebrew text. And do the same with Jeremiah when we get there, because 1 and 2 Samuel and Jeremiah differ the most of all the books from the English rendering from the Greek and the English rendering from the Hebrew. And most scholars would argue that the Greek, the Septuagint in 1 and 2 Samuel and Jeremiah, is the most accurate to the very ancient Hebrew text. So the more modern Hebrew text, the Masoretic, worked basically from not much and then pretty much copied the Septuagint anyway. Anyway, point being, it tells the story slightly differently. This version is from the Masoretic Hebrew text. But don't die without also reading the Greek Old Testament. 1 Samuel chapter 15. Saul defeats the Amalekites. One day Samuel said to Saul, "It was the Lord who told me to anoint you as king of his people, Israel. Now listen to this message from the Lord. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies has declared. I have decided to settle accounts with the nation of Amalek for opposing Israel when they came from Egypt." Some people think time causes like the Lord just to automatically forgive you because as time goes on for some crime you did years ago or we did, we don't feel as bad for it anymore. But we never actually have asked forgiveness for it. But then we think, oh no, the Lord will be fine with it as well. Well, it's time for him to settle the accounts of Amalek for when they came from Egypt. He remembers. Now go and completely destroy the entire Amalekite nation, men, women, children, babies, cattle, sheep, goats, camels, and donkeys. So Saul mobilized his army at Telaim. There were 200,000 soldiers from Israel and 10,000 men from Judah. Then Saul and his army went to a town of the Amalekites and lay in wait in the valley. Saul sent this warning to the Kenites: "Move away from where the Amalekites live, or you will die with them. For you showed kindness to all the people of Israel when they came up from Egypt." So the Kenites packed up and left. Then Saul slaughtered the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Shur, east of Egypt. He captured Agag, the Amalekite king, but completely destroyed everyone else. Saul and his men spared Agag's life and kept the best of the sheep and goats, the cattle, the fat calves, and the lambs, everything, in fact, that appealed to them. They destroyed only what was worthless or of poor quality. Then the Lord said to Samuel, "I am sorry that I ever made Saul king, for he has not been loyal to me and has refused to obey my command." Samuel was so deeply moved when he heard this that he cried out to the Lord all night. Early the next morning, Samuel went to find Saul. Someone told him, "Saul went to the town of Carmel to set up a monument to himself. Then he went on to Gilgal." When Samuel finally found him, Saul greeted him cheerfully. "May the Lord bless you," he said. "I have carried out the Lord's commands." Then, what is all that bleating of sheep and goats and lowing of cattle I hear? Samuel demanded. Now brace yourself, because Samuel is an old dude. He's like Yoda now. It's true that the army spared the best of the sheep, the goats, and the cattle, Saul admitted. But they are going to sacrifice them to the Lord your God. We have destroyed everything else. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Stop. Listen to what the Lord told me last night." "What did he tell you?" Saul asked. And Samuel told him, "Although you may think little of yourself, are you not the leader of the tribes of Israel? The Lord has anointed you king of Israel. And the Lord sent you on a mission and told you, Go and completely destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, until they are all dead. Why haven't you obeyed the Lord? Why did you rush for the plunder and do what was evil in the Lord's sight?" "But I did obey the Lord," Saul insisted. "I carried out the mission he gave me. I brought back King Agag, but I destroyed everyone else. Then my troops brought in the best of the sheep and the goats and the cattle and the plunder to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal." But Samuel replied, "What is more pleasing to the Lord, your burnt offerings and sacrifices, or your obedience to his voice?" Listen, obedience is better than sacrifice, and submission is better than offering the fat of rams. Rebellion is as sinful as witchcraft, and stubbornness as bad as worshipping idols. So because you have rejected the command of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. Obedience is better than sacrifice. True religion is more than notion. Something must be known and felt. Take my heart and let it be consecrated, Lord, to thee. Beyond the sacred page we seek thee, Lord. Then Saul admitted to Samuel, "Yes, I have sinned. I have disobeyed your instructions and the Lord's command, for I was afraid of the people and did what they demanded. But now please forgive my sin and come back with me so that I may worship the Lord." But Samuel replied, "I will not go back with you. Since you have rejected the Lord's command, he has rejected you as king of Israel." And Samuel turned to go. As Samuel turned to go, Saul tried to hold him back and tore the hem of his robe. And Samuel said to him, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to someone else who is better than you. And he who is the glory of Israel will not lie, nor will he change his mind, for he is not human that he should change his mind." Then Saul pleaded again, "I know I have sinned, but please at least honor me before the elders of my people and Oh, I thought I was going to sneeze. I didn't. Then Saul pleaded again, "I know I have sinned, but please at least honor me before the elders of my people and before Israel by coming back with me so that I may worship the Lord your God." So Samuel finally agreed and went back with him, and Saul worshipped the Lord. Then Samuel said, "Bring King Agag to me." Agag arrived full of hope, for he thought, "Surely the worst is over, and I have been spared." But Samuel said, "As your sword has killed the sons of many mothers, now your mother will be childless." And Samuel cut Agag to pieces before the Lord at Gilgal. Then Samuel went home to Ramah, and Saul returned to his house at Gibeah of Saul. Samuel never went to meet Saul again, but he mourned constantly for him, and the Lord was sorry he had ever made Saul king of Israel. And so an evil dictator is cut down. No place for him in the land of heaven. That mother murderer. We are just past the halfway mark. Please take 30 seconds, grab a drink, a green tea, a lemon souffle, a flan, a cookie, and come back in 30 seconds. Diane, in verse 15, when Saul is talking to Samuel, Saul refers to the Lord your God, so he is not owning him as his own. Quite possibly there, Diane, my other beef there that we just read was his apology and repentance. He was just blaming other people for his actions. Did you pick up on that? All right, I might have done wrong, but it was their fault. Hey, Cara, welcome. I got that message half an hour late. Eat, sleep, read Bible, repeat. Chris Henry, I think we sorted the lighting problem. It was my blinding screen. If you do go looking for English translations of the Septuagint, well, yes, it is better. It might be called the Book of Kingdoms. One Samuel, chapter 16. Samuel anoints King David. Samuel anoints David as king. Here comes a heavy hitter. And remember, Jesus is the son of David, but also his Lord. That's what the New Testament says, isn't it? Now the Lord said to Samuel, "You have mourned long enough for Saul. I have rejected him as king of Israel, so fill your flask with olive oil and go to Bethlehem. Find a man named Jesse, who lives there, for I have selected one of his sons to be my king." Now, people, Bible Hour coming off the book of Ruth are like, ooh, yeah. But Samuel asked, "How can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me." "Take a heifer with you," the Lord replied, "and say that you have come to make a sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you which of his sons to anoint for me." So Samuel did as the Lord instructed. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town came trembling to meet him. "What's wrong?" they asked. "Do you come in peace?" "Yes," Samuel replied. "I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Purify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." Then Samuel performed the purification rite for Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice too. When they arrived, Samuel took one look at Eliab and thought, "Surely this is the Lord's anointed." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Don't judge by appearance or height, for I have rejected him." The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord judgeth by the heart. Parkin admin, can you put verse 7 there in the KJV, please? Because I think it's nicely written, going from memory. Remember, Saul, one of Saul's opening descriptions was that he was tall and handsome, wasn't he? Like a foot above everybody else. Yeah. Basically, the dweeby-looking geeks are the absolute best warriors in the kingdom of God. Geeks are welcome in church life. Popularity doesn't matter two hoots in the kingdom of God. Wow, who's on admin today? That was lightning. But the Lord said unto Samuel, "Look not at his countenance, or on the height of his stature, because I have refused. The Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart." Nice. Then Jesse told his son Abinadab to step forward and walk in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, "This is not the one the Lord has chosen." Next, Jesse summoned Shimea, and Samuel said, "Neither is this the one that the Lord has chosen." In the same way, all 7 of Jesse's sons were presented to Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." Then Samuel asked, "Are these all the sons you have?" Just on that, I do think in this weird current culture we live in, where people hate themselves and hate others and are viewed like as objects online from their teenage years onwards and obsessed with trying to win people's affection and visually trying to accomplish that goal, which just is leading to isolation and depression. I do think the message that in church Jesus places value on you is such an important message today, possibly more than ever. You are made in the image of the Lord and are treasured. Was it Athanasius that said, "One child is worth more to the Lord than the entire cosmos"? Probably not Athanasius. Then Samuel asked, "Are these all the sons you have?" "There is still the youngest," Jesse replied, "but he's out in the fields watching the sheep and goats." "Send for him at once," Samuel said. "We will not sit down to eat until he arrives." So Jesse sent for him. He was dark and handsome, with beautiful eyes. And the Lord said, "This is the one, anoint him." So as David stood there among his brothers, Samuel took the flask of olive oil he had brought and anointed David with the oil. And the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day on. Then Samuel returned to Ramah. And remember the last chapter, this is a man after God's own heart. Now the Spirit of the Lord had left Saul. And for what it's worth, I actually think he never had the regenerating, saving work of the Spirit in him. I think he was anointed for a purpose, and that purpose is finished. But I won't quibble with the Bible Hour gang on that. And the Lord sent a tormenting spirit that filled him with depression and fear. Some of Saul's servants said to him, "A tormenting spirit from God is troubling you. Let us find a good musician to play the harp whenever the tormenting spirit troubles you. He will play soothing music, and you will soon be well again." "All right," Saul said, "find me someone who plays well and bring him here." One of the servants said to Saul, "One of Jesse's sons from Bethlehem is a talented harp player. Not only that, he is a brave warrior and a man of war and has good judgment. He is also a fine-looking young man, and the Lord is with him." So Saul sent messengers to Jesse to say, "Send me your son David, the shepherd." Jesse responded by sending David to Saul along with a young goat, a donkey loaded with bread, and a wineskin full of wine. So David went to Saul and began serving him. Saul, loved David very much, and David became his armor bearer. Then Saul sent word to Jesse asking, "Please let David remain in my service, for I am very pleased with him." And whenever the tormented spirit from God troubled Saul, David would play the harp. Then Saul would feel better, and the tormenting spirit would go away. So David is anointed. The Spirit is powerfully with him, and now he's serving a man who the Spirit has left him. It's fascinating stuff going on in the ancient church. It is nitty-gritty church life. And in this, the Lord is working, because he works in nitty-gritty church life. And he's still working today. 1 Samuel chapter 17. We are in the fourth. Let's take 30 seconds and then blitz it home. One Samuel chapter 17. Goliath challenges the Israelites. The Philistines now mustered their army for battle and camped between Succoth in Judah and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. Saul countered by gathering his Israelite troops near the valley of Elah. So the Philistines and Israelites faced each other on opposite hills, with the valley between them. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. Hobby horse from me. I don't really know the books of Samuel. No one really does. Possibly David. And this giant story is famous. Everybody talks about it to this day because, it's got quite a lot of airtime in the Bible. If you think back to Deuteronomy and Moses on his way to the land, they must have killed thousands of giants. No one really talks about that. That's what happens when you get to write your own press, isn't it? I'm not taking away from this event. I'm just saying Moses did this 1,000 times over. Goliath wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor and carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor bearer walked ahead of him, carrying a shield. He deliberately looks like a giant snake, a bronzy reflecting snake who's going up against the Lord's anointed. That is the story of David and Goliath. It is a snake representing evil and godlessness versus the Lord's anointed. That's the story of the Bible. Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. "Why are you all coming out to fight?" he called. "I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will all be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves." JB, is that in the Bible? Which one, JB? But if you kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me. When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. So all the kingdoms represented by these two figureheads are also on the line. This is the Bible story hanging on a thread. Now, David was the son of a man named Jesse, an Ephrathite from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. Jesse was an old man at the time, and he had 8 sons. Jesse's 3 oldest sons, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shemir, had already joined Saul's army to fight the Philistines. David was the youngest son. David's 3 oldest brothers stayed with Saul's army, but David went back and forth so he could help his father with the sheep in Bethlehem. For 40 days, every morning and evening, the Philistine champion strutted in front of the Israelite army. One day, Jesse said to David, "Take this basket of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread and carry them quickly to your brothers." JB, what does the Bible say about Jesus' ethnicity? JB, put that in our Facebook questions, because I'm not entirely sure what you mean by the question. So if you go to Park End Facebook tomorrow, we'll look at that together. One day, Jesse said to David, "Take this basket of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread and carry them quickly to your brothers. And give these 10 cuts of cheese to their captain. See how your brothers are getting along and bring back a report on how they are doing." David's brothers were with Saul and the Israelite army at the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. So David left the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts, as Jesse had directed him. He arrived at the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for the battlefield with shouts and battle cries. Soon the Israelite and Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, and hurried out to the ranks to greet his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, came out from the Philistine ranks. Then David heard him shout his usual taunt to the army of Israel. As the army saw him, they began to run away in fright. "Have you seen this giant?" the men asked. "He comes out each day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him. He will give that man one of his daughters for a wife, and his man's entire family will be exempted from paying taxes." David asked the soldiers standing nearby, "What will a man get for killing the Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel? Who is the pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God?" And these men gave David the same reply. They said, "Yes, that is a reward for killing him." But when David's oldest brother Eliab heard David talking to the men, he was angry. "What are you doing around here anyway?" he demanded. "What about the few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and deceit. You just want to see the battle." "What have I done now?" David replied. "What about the people who lived before Jesus? This is before the Bible was written, before Christianity. Will they be in heaven or hell?" All right, JB. Again, defer that one. I definitely know some answers to that question because now I know what you're asking. Just defer that one for now. Yes, this is before the Bible was written. That in itself, we need to look at that together. "What have I done now?" he replied. "I was only asking a question." He walked over to some others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer. Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sent for him. Park End now, and we'll put a link to our Facebook chat in there. And then if you find day 35, the advertisement of that, put a comment underneath that. We'll jump on it. "Don't worry about the Philistine," David told Saul. "I'll go and fight him." "Don't be ridiculous," Saul replied. "There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth." But David persisted. "I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats," he said. "When a lion or bear comes to steal a man from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. David is thinking very spiritually now, isn't he? He is fully confident in his Lord. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. Then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet and a coat of mail, but David put it on, strapped the sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. He doesn't need that stuff. He's got Jesus. I can't go in these, he protested to Saul. I'm not used to them. So David took them off again. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into his shepherd's bag. Then, armed only with his shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to Philistine. Goliath walked out toward David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at his ruddy-faced boy. Am I a dog? He roared at David, that you come at me with a stick? And he cursed David by the names of his gods. This is Jesus versus Satan, isn't it? Everything is hanging in the battle with these two representatives. The Lord's anointed, who is filled with the Spirit. The olive oil is on him, the Spirit's with him, versus this giant snake who's trusting in false gods and spitting curses at the Lord's anointed. And all the church hangs in the balance. Come over here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals, Goliath yelled. David replied to the Philistine, you come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. Not by might or by strength, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone, for he had no sword. Then David ran over and pulled Goliath's sword from its sheath. David used it to kill him and cut off his head. Remember listening to the American theologian Nancy Guthrie describing it and looking at the language use of basically it is the snake that just fell to the king of Israel. That's the gospel. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah gave me a great shout of triumph and rushed after the Philistines, chasing them as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron. The bodies of the dead and wounded Philistines were strewn along the road from Sha'araim as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the Israelite army returned and plundered the deserted Philistine camp. David took the Philistine's head to Jerusalem, but he stored the man's armor in his own tent. As Saul watched David go out to fight the Philistine, he asked Abner, the commander of his army, "Abner, whose son is this young man?" "I really don't know," Abner asked. "Well, find out who he is," the king told him. As soon as David returned from killing Goliath, Abner brought him to Saul with the Philistine's head in his hand. "Tell me about your father, young man," Saul said. And David replied, "His name is Jesse, and we live in Bethlehem." When we were children, we were told this was the reason why we should never throw stones too right or dress up as giant snakes. It is 22:01 o'clock. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The Lord's anointed has defeated the dragon, and church is spared. The Lord bless you. May that glorious hope send you off to sleep and wake you up fresh for the Lord's day tomorrow. We have our service at 6 p.m. and then we are back here at 9. And as promised, tomorrow's service will be on the book of Ruth. The Lord bless you.